So hey guys, welcome back. It's another Wednesday and it's another Halloween Horror Nights update because as I said in the last video, it is officially announcement season. So before we discuss the latest announcement that came out this past week, we have to discuss my amazing shirt from Chewy's because how perfect is it? I love it so much. I'm always looking for somewhat subtle Halloween Horror Nights shirts to wear around, and this one definitely fits the bill. It's a taco and then he's wearing a sombrero. I mean, come on. If you don't watch my weekly vlogs, then you probably don't know, but I'm obsessed with Chewy's, so this is Chewy's and Stranger Things all in one. Love it. So now we've addressed my shirt, let's move on to talking about the reason why you're here, and that is more Halloween Horror Nights news. So I have a feeling this is going to start to happen now that we're practically into August, where there's just gonna be announcement after announcement, and I'm just gonna have to start filming these on the fly. So today we are here to talk about the latest announcement for Halloween Horror Nights Orlando and Hollywood, and that is Killer Klowns from Outer Space as a house. So once again, we have a rumored house that has been confirmed, and I think everyone knew this was coming. This one was one of the houses that they were not trying to keep under wraps, I feel like. I think we all knew what was happening. It just made logical sense. They already have the costumes from last year, and as Mike Aiello said on Twitter after the fact, last year's Scarezone was a test to see the reaction to it, to see if they could get the rights to do the house, similar to Trick or Treat a couple years back where they had the Scarezone and then they had the house last year. And obviously the fan reaction to the Scarezone was huge, and I think even general public ended up liking it a lot. I will share my thoughts on it in a little bit, but it looks like it had enough of a demand at the event and enough of a fan following that they were able to get the okay to do the house. So that means Killer Klowns from Outer Space coming to Orlando as a house, and supposedly it's going to be in the Shrek location. So that's roughly a soundstage. It's not a soundstage, it's not as much space as a soundstage, but it's air conditioned, so those clowns should all be thankful. You'll be in air conditioning this time, whoever is in it, and it'll have a good amount of space to build sets. So before I share my thoughts on the house, let's talk about the press release from Universal. So the press release lists some of the things we'll see in the house, including the baby clowns and Clownzilla. Can't wait to see how they do that. I'm already ready for the Marshmallow Man, so I can't wait to see how they're gonna do Clownzilla. And they also include the circus tent spaceship, which, no brainer. And the cotton candy cocoon storage room, which is a mouthful, where they keep the victims. So we already saw the cotton candy cocoons, that's really fun to say, cotton candy cocoons in the streets last year. But when I watched the movie, that room definitely lends itself to a house. They also mentioned some smells that we're getting, which I'm not a fan of smells in houses. They're usually not good, but they mentioned cotton candy, which, okay, that's good. Stale buttery popcorn, okay, and ice cream. So okay, those are all okay. I'm okay with those. It's not like the poop smell or rotten things, so okay. But I guess it is true. It says, don't be fooled though, these otherwise pleasant aromas are a sign of the murderous gang of clowns that awaits you as you move from scene to scene. So yes, I guess it is placating me into thinking, ooh, ice cream, cotton candy, and that's how you die. There will be no escaping the big teeth of the big top. Okay, so that's the press release. Let's discuss my thoughts on Killer Klowns from Outer Space. Despite being an 80s movie fanatic and having a ton of 80s movies as my absolute favorite movies of all time, and growing up in the 80s and experiencing all these things, somehow Killer Klowns did not become part of my pop culture references. I didn't see the movie for the first time until last year as Halloween Horror Nights homework. Now, I'd heard of the movie in Halloween Horror Nights circles because it's one of those movies that went around, just like Ghostbusters did, of Killer Klowns from Outer Space this year, guys, and we're like, okay, until last year when it finally happened. So when it finally got announced last year, I was like, all right, I'll finally watch this movie, and I did. And I mean, it was hysterical. It's an 80s gem. It has all of the things I love about 80s movies. I laughed when I was supposed to. I laughed when I wasn't supposed to. It was a great movie experience watching an 80s movie 30 years later, you know, 30 plus years later, and just having a good time with it. when I saw it, I absolutely saw plenty of scenes that I thought would lend itself to a house, and I was skeptical about it being a Scarezone last year because of that. Obviously the costumes were fantastic last year, and obviously the music is fantastic, which we'll go back to, but I wasn't sure how it's going to work on the streets. When I was there, which was the very first week of the event last year, I was there opening weekend and I was there the second weekend. We stayed for a full week. My thoughts on it were mostly verified. However, the zone changed greatly over the course of the run, and I saw plenty of videos of everyone having an absolute blast in the Scarezone and the actors really getting into their roles and really getting into interactions and it becoming like the fun party fan zone. And if I had experienced that, my opinion of the zone would have been completely different. Opening weekend was massively packed, way more packed than I've ever seen opening weekend, and so that particular weekend especially, it was a photo zone. Every time I walked through it, all the clowns were being grabbed for photos, and it seemed like every time I walked through, there weren't much interactions happening and it was all selfies. The second weekend, I think, is where most of my footage is from the zone, and they were getting into character and they were getting more into it, but they hadn't gotten as zany as they did later in the month. So I didn't have as much fan appreciation for the zone as if I would have experienced later. I know I would have absolutely loved it if I could have gotten on some of those karaoke sing-alongs they did where the whole group got together, especially at the end of the night, the last of the night, jamming out to the theme song. I would have been all about that. Moving that into a house is going to be tough. I'm worried that the fans of the Scarezone are going to have a hard time with it being a house, because you're not going to get all those interactions that they received when it was a Scarezone, especially later in the month. They're not gonna be able to replicate that in a house, because you know how it is in houses, you boo and skidoo, right? So you get a couple seconds to scare someone and you're not gonna have the opportunity to have those funny interactions, and they're definitely not gonna have a sing-along dance party unless they design that in the house, which would be amazing, but I doubt they're gonna do that. However, movie fans, I think, are going to be very happy with this. I think the movie has plenty of sets, has plenty of great opportunities for a house. I've got this one probably in my solid middle of expectations. It's an IP we already saw last year, so that's it drops it a little lower on my list because I do like newer things rather than repeat. But I also think it will be a completely different flavor than any other house that's going to be at the event this year. We've got a lot of dark houses. I know Ghostbusters lighter, but it's a direct copy of the movie. This is going to have very colorful sets. It's going to feel like a 3D house, even though I don't think it's a 3D house. But for me, I think the thing I'm looking forward to most with this house is just hearing the soundtrack in the park again. And I swear I'm not just sucking up because the composer for the movies happens to watch my vlogs. Hi, John. My greatest takeaway from the Scarezone last year was the soundtrack. You know, I watched the movie and obviously the theme song is super catchy. You can't miss the theme song watching the movie. But I didn't hone in on the music when I was watching it at home. But when you're in the theme park, when you're in Howling Horror Nights, the music of the park becomes part of the fabric of the event. And whenever I get home and I'm missing the event, I listen to the soundtracks. And usually someone is kind enough to put together a playlist of all the songs, doing Shazam, I guess, throughout the park. And I listen to those playlists for the rest of September, October, reminding myself of the event. I hear the music again when I'm editing the videos. So the music of each year becomes very much what I'm attached to. And even though we didn't spend a ton of time in the Killer Klowns Scarezone, that music became part of the event because when I got home, guess what? I was watching everyone's vlogs. Everyone was spending so much time in Killer Klowns that the soundtrack is a huge part of Howling Horror Nights 28 for me. And I'm very much looking forward to hearing the soundtrack. Hopefully throughout the park, they probably will because it's a big property and they'll probably put it in rotation. But especially in the queue. You know they're gonna have those songs blasting in the queue, and hopefully in the house as well. I'm sure they will. I've still only seen the movie once, but I listened to the soundtrack a ton of times throughout my Halloween season last year. I already started listening to it again last night in preparation to make this video. And especially like the Killer Clown March, that just gets me right back in the Howling Horror Nights spirit. And hopefully we can have our own little clown dance parties in the house, even if it's not officially sanctioned by the house design. We're gonna be dancing anyway, right? So that is Killer Klowns. What do you guys think? Are you excited to see it as a house this year? Were you part of the Scarezone crew out there dancing with them every weekend? And how do you think the new cast will live up to last year's cast? Because that's another thing. It's not going to be the same clowns. It's going to be different people. So they have a lot to live up to, living up to last year's zone. So since I already had to film this video, I want to quickly go through the rumored scare zones for 2019 because I haven't discussed those yet and we really don't know much about them, but I want to at least touch on them so that when they start getting announced we can go back and compare to what the rumors were. So here is our current list of rumored scare zones, and the thing with scare zones is they leak last because there's no sets being built visibly. You know, people start to find things out because the houses have to get built so far in advance. But the scare zones aren't like that, so we really won't know for sure scare zones probably until they start to have rehearsals. But here are the 5 scare zones we've heard rumored so far. So we have Anarcade, which is like anarchy, but with aid at the end. Could be an arcade, could just be anarchy crazy, I don't know. That's really all we got. So Anarcade, Zombieland, which makes sense because I just saw a trailer for Zombieland 2. Then we've got a Rob Zombie scare zone, so I guess the movies of Rob Zombie. Movies and music of Rob Zombie, I think is what it is. One that's plastic surgery, which I think is supposed to be 7 style, where they change throughout the night. Could be interesting. And then Vikings. And then although it's not on this list, I think it's safe to assume we're probably gonna have chainsaws roaming and or chainsaws in the Simpsons area because they just never announced that zone, but yes, somehow a zone appears there, so that's probably a safe bet. So we have a recent trend of IPs taking over scare zones, which was never the case until Walking Dead, but Walking Dead pretty much changed everything. But as much as I understand IPs as houses because you can recreate your favorite movies or get to walk through, experience your favorite movies, I think it's much less effective in a scare zone. I can understand using them as testing ground like Trick or Treat or Killer Klowns if you want to get a house and this is the only way you can get the house is to do a scare zone. I can understand that. I just don't want it to become a standard where every year we have a few different IP scare zones because I just don't think they're nearly as effective as the house, and you're losing the creative aspect of what would have been an awesome original scare zone, which is my same argument against houses, but even more so on scare zones because we get super quirky, awesome scare zones when A&D are allowed to do their own creative items. But that's just my little piece. I just don't care for IPs and scare zones, and I hope we move away from that, especially next year. We've got the 30th anniversary next year, so I'm crossing my fingers that that will be a mostly original / Halloween Horror Nights history year where we're bringing back a lot of sequels and reliving some of those favorite years in that anniversary. But that's my little piece on IPs and scare zones. We'll see more once they officially get announced and see if all of that was for nothing. Maybe it's all originals and these are all incorrect. We don't know. So that's gonna wrap things up for today, but there's a high probability that you'll be seeing me again very soon as we are in announcement season, and I'll be back to discuss the next announcement whenever it's available. See you guys then. Bye.